This is a presentation to explain a method of creating basic stone intarsia. I refer to this as Rockhound Intarsia because I am a rockhound, so my interest and intent here is to create pieces that showcase the unique patterns and characteristics of various stones and minerals. This is actually a variation of the introduction presentation I give to students enrolled in the Intarsia classes I teach at the William Holland School of Lapidary Arts, located in Young Harris, Georgia. There is more information regarding the school, including contact information, at the end of the presentation. Most Rockhound Intarsia is created with very simple designs. Since the intent is to showcase the centerpiece, it's best not to clutter up the design with complicated geometric patterns that may detract from it. Everything will be done using straight lines with no attempt at curve fitting. To create an intarsia piece, several lapidary power tools and some basic hand tools will be used. The intarsia piece itself will be constructed from some combination of natural stone and or synthetic materials. Some people prefer to use all natural stone. However, it's perfectly fine to use a variety of other materials such as reconstituted stone, artificial or simulated stone, stained glass, dichroic glass, etc. It's preferable to use thin slabs of material. This reduces a lot of stone waste and excess grinding time. So if you're cutting your own slabs, I always recommend that you cut them thin. We will be working primarily with material that has been cut into slabs. The trim saw is used for cutting out the centerpiece and to cut strips of material from the various slabs to make borders. The flat lap is used primarily to flatten the intarsia construction prior to attaching a backing piece. The intarsia grinder is a special purpose piece of equipment that is essentially a flat lap that has been rotated 90 degrees and remounted. It also has a shelf in front of the lap to support the piece being ground. Finally, we will use a multi-wheel lapidary grinder, such as a genie, to finish grinding, shaping, and polishing the intarsia piece. This is the intarsia grinder I use. It's basically a 6-inch flat lap machine that has the motor and lap rotated 90 degrees. It has a built-in drip system and drain trap and a shelf mounted perpendicular to the front of the lap. This makes it easy to lay a piece of material flat on the table while the edge is being ground smooth to 90 degrees. I use a 180 grit lap on my machine. This machine is commercially available and contact information is included at the end of this presentation. I should mention that it's entirely possible to create intarsia with just a flat lap. If you have access to a flat lap, then with some practice, you can create fine intarsia with it alone. However, the intarsia grinder makes the process of grinding perpendicular flat surfaces much easier and faster. A set of calipers provides a simple method for squaring up a rectangle or a square shape. A ruler is frequently used to mark trim saw lines. A pencil turns out to be a very important tool in making sure that surfaces to be glued are perfectly flat. More on this later. Super glue is used to attach all of the borders while constructing the intarsia. Most any super glue will work, but I prefer the gel type, and the particular Loctite brand shown here has a very user-friendly applicator. Finally, a 2-part clear epoxy is used to attach the backing to the intarsia and thereby provide greater structural integrity to the entire piece. Before we get into the details of actually creating an intarsia, let's take a quick look at an overview of the overall creation process. We begin generally by selecting material for the centerpiece. Next, we define the shape the completed piece will take. For example, will it end up as a square, a rectangle, a triangle, or some other geometric shape, or possibly some freeform. Next, we can select the contrasting material to be used for the one or more borders that will be attached. Then we'll systematically begin attaching the borders. When all the borders are finally in place, it's time to attach the backing piece with epoxy. After the epoxy has cured, we'll trim off any excess border material. The final step is to treat the Intarsia construction as if it were going to be a cabochon. Therefore, we'll perform the usual grinding and polishing steps to complete this on a multi-wheel grinder such as a Genie. For our example, I've selected a slab of mushroom jasper or mushroom rhyolite that contains a pattern that should make for an interesting centerpiece. A preliminary rectangular shape has been roughly defined on the slab using a straight edge and a pencil. I could have used a cabbing template or any other square or rectangular shaped object to define this shape. Once the shape has been defined, we'll take the slab to the trim saw and cut it out. The trim saw cuts are made outside of the marked lines. We will be refining the shape later with the Intarsia grinder. Now we begin the process of refining the shape of the centerpiece. The ultimate goal is to have parallel sides that are absolutely flat. To accomplish this, I like to use a set of calipers, and although there are a number of ways of obtaining parallel sides, I've adopted this one for use in my classes, and it seems to be an effective method. You may use any approach you like so long as you keep in mind that the goal is obtaining parallel sides. We begin by placing the piece in the calipers so as to get a rough idea of how close we are to the goal. Here we can see that we'll need to grind some on the top and the bottom to begin to get the sides parallel. Now we'll turn on the Intarsia grinder motor and start the water drip system, and then place the centerpiece on the machine's table. The preliminary objective will be to gently grind the top and the bottom sides down to the pencil lines. This takes a little practice, getting used to applying just the right amount of pressure and applying it evenly across the surface. Keeping the piece flat against the table, it is then gently eased into the grinding lap. Again, this usually ends up being a trial and error process as we grind a little and then recheck with the calipers and then grind some more. This is repeated until the sides are parallel. When checking the first two sides for parallel, there should not be any visible gaps where the sides of the centerpiece meet the sides of the caliper jaws. Also, as a final test, the centerpiece must be able to easily slide in and out within the caliper jaws. If any visible gaps are seen, or if the piece will not slide in and out easily, then one or both of the sides will need to be ground some more. After the first two sides are completed, then the centerpiece is rotated 90 degrees and the process is repeated on the other two sides. After all of this is completed, then we can prepare to attach the first set of borders. To create the borders, a slab of contrasting material is selected and then cut into thin strips on the trim saw. 4 strips will be required, one for each side of the centerpiece. For our example, the centerpiece will be surrounded by 2 outer borders. The first band will be made from a reddish-orange Brazilian jasper. The outer band will be made from a black basalt mineral called basanite that comes out of California. I frequently use black for borders as it does a good job of delineating and complementing other colors and patterns to make them stand out. Basanite is a good choice as it is inexpensive, fairly hard, and takes a good polish. However, you may use most any black material that you might have. Black jade is a good choice, but it can be quite pricey. We begin by marking trim saw cutting lines on the slab. The width of each strip should be wider than the thickness of the centerpiece. The initial trim saw cuts are made, and with this particular slab of material, we ended up with 4 usable pieces and 1 excess piece. The strips are further trimmed in length so that they are just slightly longer than the sides of the centerpiece they will be attached to. In this example, we ended up with some excess strips of material that are available for use in future projects. This is a picture just to show how the bands will eventually be oriented to the centerpiece. Before the border pieces are attached, the sides of the centerpiece and the border strip must be completely flat. This ensures that the glue will adhere properly and there will be no visible gaps between the 2 pieces. To aid in accomplishing this, we first thoroughly mark the sides that will be glued with a pencil. Then the 2 surfaces are carefully ground on the Intarsia grinder until the pencil marks are gone. In doing this, the pencil marks will serve as an indicator of flatness. So when the pencil marks are completely gone, the surface should be flat and ready to be glued. Next, using the Intarsia grinder, we will gently grind the sides of both pieces until the pencil marks are completely gone. Here we show the border piece being ground. Finally, when all of the pencil marks on both pieces have been ground away, the sides are now ready to be glued. Prior to gluing, all surfaces should be wiped down with acetone to remove any remaining oils from saws or from your hands. Then a layer of super glue is applied to one of the flattened surfaces. Then the 2 flattened sides are pressed and held together for about 10 seconds. In the complicated looking picture above, the pieces are set on a flat non-stick surface and pressed together. In this example, a pusher is also used to gain some mechanical advantage. The non-stick surface can be a sheet of glass or, as in the picture above, a sheet of wax paper on a flat tabletop. The downward pressure is to ensure that the band does not slip and ride up the side of the centerpiece before the glue has a chance to dry. This process may appear overly complicated, but while you're still learning to do this, it's a good way to keep you from making mistakes. After you gain more confidence, you may find that you can simply hold the 2 pieces in your hands and attach the pieces free-handed. Following the process just described, this picture shows the first 2 borders having been attached. Note that there's overlap on all 4 ends. Next, we place the piece on the Intarsia grinder table and gently grind the overlapped ends so that they are flush with the bare sides of the centerpiece.